Hello, horror fans, and welcome to episode 58 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is writer-artist Nevin Arnold, the creator of Monsterella. Nevin is currently using Kickstarter to fund the release of his second issue of Monsterella, an anthology comic in the vein of classic Vampirella in 2000 AD. He's already far surpassed his funding goal, and he's plowing through stretch goals. We recorded this on the day the Kickstarter campaign launches. You'll still have some time to back the project after hearing this. I backed it myself. Nevin can be found online at monsterella.ca and at facebook.com/hangmancomics. Now, we'll get right into the show. Here's episode 58 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Nevin Arnold. Alright, so to kick things off, if you had to pitch Monsterella to someone on the street or at a convention or what have you, how would you describe the book to someone?
Well, here's the pitch. Monsterella is an action-adventure horror sci-fi anthology inspired by the classic Vampirella and 2000 AD magazines of the 1970s. So it's a lot like the old Vampirella magazines of the 70s in the sense that it starts off with a Monsterella adventure, and then after her story, she goes on to introduce other horror sci-fi stories.
Yeah, I definitely got a Vampirella feel to it when I read through the first issue. I was like, all right, no, I could see this vibe. I mean, like, obviously similar name too, but very, very different in terms of some of the content and everything, which I liked. Well, similar outfit too.
Yeah, it's definitely inspired by.
Yeah, so was that something, I guess, that kind of like stuck out to you from like an earlier age or something? Or was like, I mean, well, I guess like as an impressionable young boy, it's hard not to look at Vampirella and go, all right, yes, I'm interested in this.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, for her and Elvira and all those icons of that era for sure have always stuck with me and always come into play whenever I'm creating a new female character for sure.
Yeah, because you also have I'm probably going to butcher that pronunciation, but was it Calvera of the Dead?
Yeah, Calavera the Undead. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's that kind of sexy, monstrous femme fatale is something that kind of permeates through a little more of your work.
Yeah,
too.
That's right. It seems to be a pretty common theme. Yeah.
Well, look, there's certainly a market for it. There's no problems with it. You know, yeah. It's not it's the kind of like cheesecakey stuff is kept to a minimum. Like, yeah, right. Like, I think in the opening scene of the first issue for Monsterella, like, yeah, she's coming out of the shower, but everything is kind of tasteful. But she's also kicking ass left and right.
Yeah,
so it's like, okay,
yeah,
you can kind of all go with this. But you set this up as an anthology. So, like you said, you have an introductory issue or a story that is one of Monsterella's proper adventures, but then she kind of acts like the Crypt Keeper or Uncle Creepy there, kind of introducing or closing out different stories there. So are you, I guess, how involved are you with the different stories that are created there? Are you kind of like acting as editor, or are you also kind of pitching those stories?
No, I wrote one of the other stories that was in the first issue, the Space Siren of Sector 13, and I wrote that one. Otherwise, the rest of the stories in the first one and all the stories in the second issue, I pretty much I know all these writers and artists, and we've all done shows together, and we go back a ways, so I more or less just told them, just come up with something and keep it to about this many pages and anything goes. That's
pretty cool. Like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you get some good response for something like that, especially when your main I guess instruction is anything goes. Just It's like, keep it in these parameters. You're not going to get like a Pilgrim story, but you're going to get some pretty crazy sci-fi stuff, it seems.
Oh yeah, exactly. I just say as long as it's horror or sci-fi or something along those lines, and then anything goes. Which lots of creative freedom there, so they're pretty fun to do.
Yeah, this really does bridge the gap between sci-fi and horror. Like, it's so, like, you're dealing with crazy monsters that are also in space. So I like that kind of vibe to it, because it's like, you could have just had aliens, you could have just done monsters, but like, no, this is what the two great tastes that taste great together kind of thing with
that's what we were going for. Yeah.
Now, why, I guess, the anthology? So why not do more of a Monsterella kind of like regular series?
It all started with me and all the artists involved. We're all working away at our own books. I'm continually working on Calavera the Undead, although nothing's come out in a few years. And it's really slow going because it takes a long time. Most of us, we work this around our day jobs, our families, all of our obligations. So for myself, everything that I've ever done in comics in the last 5 years has been between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., 7 days a week. And that's all that I have time for. So the other artists and writers, a lot of them are in the same boat. So we all thought, well, instead of, coming out with a new comic once every couple years, what if we all, sort of grouped together and did a bunch of short stories, did an anthology so that we could kind of get them out more frequently.
Yeah, that's a smart way to look at it. I appreciate that instead of just, well, we're going to write a 60-issue epic, and this is how I'm going to break into comics,
Yeah, exactly.
So you're using what you have available, which is, I think, a great way to do it.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Especially since it sounds like you have like a little collective of creators up there, which is great. That's having that kind of team to not only bounce stuff off of, but, collaborate with and stuff has got to be a good, welcoming kind of environment.
Yeah, it's really great. There's a lot of shows here on the island, and from Victoria all the way up island, and time and time again we go to these shows and I see all these artists and writers and go from table to table and just like, wow, you're amazing, and there's just no end to the talent here. Sun Kamanaki, the artist of the cover of the first issue. She's worked on Lady Death covers. There's all of them have done such amazing work, and so when I bump into them at the shows, I definitely always say, hey, you up for working on something? And they're always up for it. So there's no end to the talent here to tap.
Well, that's great, because then you get your repeat customers in that case. You get people that are like, yes, I had a great time submitting a story last time. Let's do it again. What else can we do here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what was your experience like with Kickstarter the first time around? Was that like your first experience with the platform?
It was. It was first time. A friend of mine, Garth Matthews, he does the comic book Witch Creek Road.
Yeah, I've had Garth on the show. Yeah, I love that book, Witch Creek Road. It's creepy as hell.
Oh yeah, no, it's edge of your seat. Yeah, he had done his Kickstarter and it went really well. So I had him to ask a lot of questions of what worked and what didn't, and he was happy to share and helped me shape up the page and sort of how to go about it. And it's really nerve-wracking because to go into Kickstarter, you have to be the sort of person that has like a lot of family and friends that are ready to step up, and a lot of them did. But yeah, I was pretty nervous how that would go over, but it went really well.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like you exceeded your goal, obviously, but it seemed like things were all pretty positive in terms of how it all came out. So you're back again for another one. So I guess your repeat experience in that case. It wasn't enough to scare you away. So
no. Yeah, back tonight actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of, I guess, changes or adjustments would you have made in between the two Kickstarters? Like, was there something that you had with the first Kickstarter campaign you're like, oh, never again? Like, we're gonna have to do it this way, or something? Maybe you're approaching it a little bit differently.
Yeah, there's a few things like as far as shipping, you definitely don't want to underestimate how much your shipping costs are going to be when you're shipping out 100 items. But some things that I didn't expect, because I got a lot of shipping prices to get things out to the States. And I thought, okay, well, this is how much it costs to go to the States, so it's going to be a little bit less within Canada. But that was one curveball, was that mailing certain items was a lot more, in some cases, double the cost to ship within the country than it was to ship outside of the country, which was pretty shocking. Yeah, so that was one curveball. Another one is that I didn't know that backers couldn't back more than one reward.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can only back one reward. So if you're bundling stuff up and I guess basically you just want to say, okay, here's the item plus this, here's the item plus this and this, opposed to, okay, you can get this, or you can get this, or you can get that, because then a lot of people were messaging me saying, well, I want this, but then I don't get the deluxe edition of the book, or I want this, but then I don't get the sticker and all that. So I tried to be more package deal. This is the bigger package deal. This is bigger yet.
Yeah. Build on the previous levels to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that worked well for me. And then the digital copies as well. Just to make sure that the digital copies are available with all of the rewards. Because a lot of people just want the digital copy, but some people want the digital copy, but they just want the poster or whatever. Yeah. So I tried to include that with every item.
So I'm glad to hear, as a primarily digital backer, I'm glad to hear that, because all too often I see creators neglecting the digital reader, and it's like, that sending a PDF costs you nothing. So you could get a few bucks out of that, and you're pretty set. But otherwise, it's like, no, I only want the book, and it's, they're only offering the book, and it's like, that's frustrating, because it's like, well, here I am, money in hand, like I'm ready to back, and then I'm like, well, I'm out, like can't do anything here. I'm not going to go out and back. But it also, I like the digital side because it's allows you to kind of like try out someone new. So it's like, all right, if I don't know this creator well enough yet, one, can they deliver? Can they do all this? Let me see what they can do, and then usually upgrading later on to include the physical copies of stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
But you're also I'm curious your approach to the book itself, because you're a writer and an artist. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So how do you approach a story in general, in when you're writing and drawing the book? Do you look at it do you write out a full script? Do you kind of jump into drawing? Is that kind of like a mixture of a mixture of two?
When I did the first issue of Monsterella, I more or less just came up with sort of how I did the first issue of Calavera the Undead. I just wrote the first issue, and then I sort of had some kind of vague ideas where I wanted to go from there, but wanted to just really nail down the first one. So that's how I did Monsterella #1. But then when I wrote Monsterella 2, I pretty much wrote like all the rest of Monsterella's history kind of going forward from here. And I write kind of visually, so I do my layouts and my script side by side. So I have these little layout sheets where I'm kind of like drawing out the story and sort of seeing it come to life as I go. And then that also helps me figure out exactly how many pages it's going to be, because I have to work within a certain amount of pages for each part. But yeah, that's pretty much how I do it.
That's cool, because I feel like every writer artist does it a little bit differently. But I'm surprised, at least from my side of understanding. Well, like a lot of them do still write out a full script. I mean, I like the way that you're approaching it though, because it's like you're getting that visual element to it from the beginning, and seeing how it might look as you're putting all the pieces together.
Yeah, it really helps, especially because you want every page to have something really punchy in it, kind of thing. So you can kind of see that as it's coming together. Okay, this is a good page. Okay, this is, this needs to be 2 pages because there's just too much. It's too congested. It's looking too busy. And, so from that works for me anyway.
And now you had Calavera pop up in the first issue. Is she going to make a return appearance with the second issue of Monsterella?
That was a little like a little backup story that was just in the deluxe edition of the first one. So she's not actually in the second. And so far she's not in the third, but she might make an appearance in like a deluxe edition of the third one. But I am working on more Calavera the Undead stories.
Well, maybe that's a stretch goal down the line, I guess. To offer some more people, if you want to, expand that world or have her cross. Because it seems like the two characters between Monsterella and Calavera, it's like they can work pretty well. I don't know how well they work together, but like they would make for an interesting crossover between the two of them.
It would. I have written a crossover, even though they take place in the same universe, but Monsterella is in the vast future. So she's sort of like 200 or 300 years in the future kind of thing. So it's obviously one of those time travel kind of crossovers. But I have been fooling around.
Oh, that's great. See, that I'm very excited about. it's like great. You introduce two cool indie horror characters, and then let's have them meet now and what else they can do there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, going back to the whole anthology and Vampirella kind of aspect, I mean, aside from characters like Vampirella, were there what other things did you kind of get into when you started getting into comics?
Like which other like sort of characters was I
books?
into?
Like what I'm curious of is like how. I'm always interested to see how influential like old school horror books have been on this like current generation of creators. It seems like even people that weren't like old enough to have witnessed like the original Tales from the Crypt or EC Comics kind of stuff, they still like found them somehow, and that became influential down the line. It helped create this kind of fascination with horror or monsters or stuff like that. Sometimes it's just, watching a Friday the 13th at a way too early age, but it's, it can kind of go both ways.
Yeah, for me, because I was born in the 70s, so I obviously wasn't reading the horror magazines of the 70s at the time. But yeah, for me, in the mid 80s or so, when I used to spend the summers at my aunt's house, my cousin had a fair bit of Vampirella and creepy and eerie magazines. They were usually in the bathroom, and so I would read those, and those were pretty amazing. He had a lot of cool posters up in his room too. But I also, if you got up early enough in the morning, back in the old days when there was only cartoons on Saturday morning, if you got up early enough, you would see that Elvira show, the one where she comes on and then she introduces like some sort of like B horror movie or something like that. But a lot of the time I would try to get up early enough to see that. It's probably the middle of the night, but and the first time I saw Elvira, that was probably the first time that I really noticed women kind of thing. And so that kind of stuck with me. And the old Vampirella magazines and, later, I would get into, anything that Jack Kirby was doing, 2000 AD. That was a really cool, book, all the Judge Dredd and Rogue Trooper and all that. And those were also short stories too. So that kind of always sort of appealed to me as well.
Yeah, 2000 AD wasn't something I was even like aware of until way later in life. I think like in looking back on it, like I don't know if it was just not available or just wasn't like, it was like an import that didn't make it down here in the States or something. But like, now I see like all this work, great work that they're doing. And I just heard an interview with, I'm blanking on his name now, but it was the guy who directed the Warcraft movie, but like he did Duncan Jones, who also did Moon, and he has a new movie out now. But like he was saying, like they asked him about, do you want to do comic book movies, and he's like, there's outside of Judge Dredd, there's like a ton of characters in 2000 AD that like no one has touched. Like it's like you could ask like any British director, and I'm sure they would like jump at the chance to do any of the characters that have appeared in that book over the years. And it's just like a wealth of insane like sci-fi and genre stories that have been going back for years.
It is, yeah, and it is a magazine. I'm pretty sure it was only available in the UK. It's you would only see the occasional issue in some kind of used bookstore kind of a thing in the comic book. Back
in that pre-internet world where you would you'd only hear about stuff like a Judge Dredd or something like that, and then all of a sudden you get a Sylvester Stallone movie and everyone's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Times have changed. For some would argue for the better in that case, because you're not just surprised by a Sylvester Stallone movie. You're able to prepare for it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, I love the kind of mix between the sci-fi and the alien side of sci-fi alien and then like the monster. Are you how do you approach the designs and stuff for something like that? Are you kind of like taking like, well, I like werewolves and I like aliens and now like squish them together and now we got something like in between?
Yeah, pretty much for the monsters. I mean, I just really love drawing monsters, so I don't even really plan it out if I'm going to have a scene where there's a whole bunch of monsters. I in my little layout pages, I more or less put, stick monster in here, or insert creature here, and I just sort of wing it because it's just, I'm probably with the way that Jack Kirby used to draw his bizarre creatures and monsters. I mean, he was the best at, he had the weirdest, most bizarre, creatures. So I look at a lot of his stuff, before I go into a page where I have to draw like 50 monsters kind of thing to make a big enough variety of them.
Yeah, if you're going to take influence from anybody, I think someone like Jack Kirby is probably a good place to start. Like, he did know a thing or two about drawing, drawing some great characters, creating characters. That's cool. So, like, do you, like, I'm trying to envision, like, how you kind of come at that. So is it a matter of, like, you're drawing it and you're like, all right, well, yeah, you can use another eye here, or like another mouth here, another limb here, or, is it just this kind of like weird amalgam then of just body parts and teeth and
Yeah, pretty much, because with these monsters, and especially with alien monsters, anything goes. It can look like anything. It can have eyeballs coming out of its chest, or eyeballs for nipples, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It can be anything. It can have arms coming out of its head, or not have any arms or legs. It could be half octopus. Like, anything goes. So it's like a blank canvas. It's a lot of fun to work with, opposed to drawing, classic monsters that, if you're going to draw a werewolf, it pretty much has to
you have to
look
have
like
some
a
sort
werewolf.
of dog element there, but like, yeah, maybe in space they call werewolves, werewolves have tentacles. Like, what are you going to do? Like, that's what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I'm still just chuckling of the phrase nipples for eyes. That just stood out to me. Like, all right, like.
Well, you remember that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm going to be coming through the second issue now, looking for where are the nipple eyes? Where are the nipple eyys?
It might be in the third.
Yeah, we're a little far along for this one. Yeah, I think the kind of desolation of space can add to that kind of horror. I think when you look at movies like Aliens and stuff like that, where it's like, it's one thing to be out and to be fighting a monster, but then it's another thing to be stuck in a spaceship or be stranded on a foreign planet and then also be attacked by monsters. It's like right now you're just trying to survive. It's like, Gilligan's Island or something where you're just trying to get out alive, but obviously a way more scary Gilligan's Island, not one where it's like, oh, we're just going to eat a lot of coconuts or make it out of radio or something. But that survival horror aspect to it certainly heightens that. And again, like, they're in space. Like, it's like you're where can you go especially if you're out in a spaceship? Like, you're stuck in this box. You have no real place to run, and you're kind of forced to confront whatever monster comes your way.
Yeah, that's, I think, the scary part is you have no choice. There's nowhere to run or hide. You have to face this threat. And with them, with it taking place on a, tiny little planet, which is a prison planet of the universe's worst and most dangerous monsters, and there's nowhere to go. That to me would be pretty scary.
Yeah, it's a pretty horrifying thing. But yet, despite all that, Monsterella runs that prison. Like, that was, well, up until, slight spoilers for the very first issue there, but like, she is tough enough and badass enough that it's like, she's gonna run that whole prison herself, or obviously there's guards and stuff like that, but it's like, that's the way that's the position she finds herself in the very beginning, and it's like, yeah, right, she can go toe to toe with all these other crazy alien monsters because that's literally her job,
Exactly. Yeah. That's her position, and it hasn't revealed this yet, but it was actually a punishment for her to be sent there to do this. But at the same time, they knew that she was probably the only person in the universe that could handle a position like this.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because otherwise I'm thinking, like, wonder what that, like, interview process was like. Like, did they take out ads on Craigslist? Did they did they run online ads trying to get a position? We just got to fill this position. Their benefits, that could have been an interesting process.
No, the pay. Yeah, the pay is not very good, and she before this, and it doesn't really go into this yet either, but before this, she was like a monster hunter, basically. So she would be like a freelance bounty hunter where, some creature is terrorizing your planet or whatever. She would be the person that you would call to handle the problem, sort of thing. So, but unfortunately, there was so much collateral damage all the time, every time that she was on a case, that the Universal Council kind of more or less gave her, they said, okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have to go to this prison, and you're going to be the warden, and this is your job now. We want you out of our hair, kind of thing.
So one way to handle it with red tape instead of actual official or some sort of fight or something like that.
Exactly.
See, so how I guess far back have you kind of created the history for this character? I mean, we've only seen glimpses of her in one issue, soon to be 2 issues. But the have you written out the Bible for Monsterella?
Yeah, pretty much, because we started to work on a Monsterella Origins story. There was a couple rough pages in the deluxe edition, the deluxe digital edition there, and Andrew Fryer was drawing it, and it pretty much starts when she's a little girl and she's just learning to hunt with her father in the jungle, kind of thing. And I pretty much had to figure out, where she was born, who her parents are, how she learned to do what she learned to do. She's pretty much figured out from start to finish. Yeah,
you did the homework already, so now it's just a matter of us getting it out out there into the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the book is, at least the first one, is presented all in black and white. Has there been any talk about trying to get that colored, either now or down the line?
No, I think even if it was an option, I don't think I'd take it. I've always preferred black and white comics, and I'm a huge fan of the old Ninja Turtle comics, and the old Vampirella ones were all black and white, and 2000 AD. And I don't know, there's just something very, very honest and raw and meaty about just the black and white art, and the halftones, or I used some gray watercolors this time around. But yeah, I think the plan will always be to just keep it true to that sort of 70s indie kind of look.
Yeah, traditionalist in that case. Yeah, that makes sense. That's I feel like I could go either way. I love the look of a good color comic, but you bring up a really great point in that it's if the vibe that you're going for with this kind of book is to send up to those old 1970s style comics, it not only should be in black and white, but kind of has to. So
yeah. So that's probably the way it'll probably always stay.
Well, that's a fitting description to it. I'm more excited for the book after rereading the first issue and hearing you describe it. Like I said, you did your homework with it, so it's a matter of you prepared all of this, and now it's just this has clearly been kicking around in your head for a little while, and now you're kind of well, we need to get this out there and get it into the world so that other people can witness it and get acquainted with Monsterella. But it's it sounds like there's a lot of possibility for what you can do with this character, and I'm really pumped to see what you do with it. Now it's not only between the Kickstarter, but the future of this. If you're able to do all of this in between the hours of 5 and 7 a.m. every day, well done.
Oh, thanks.
That's great. So we'll obviously link up the Kickstarter in the show notes, and I'm planning on backing it too. It's gonna we're recording this on the day you're launching the Kickstarter, so looking forward to it launching. But aside from that, I guess where are the best places for folks to find you online and to check out your work?
Probably the best place now is monsterella.ca. So not .com, but .ca, and probably our Hangman Comics Facebook page.
Do you have plans to release other titles under the Hangman Comics moniker? It's probably going to be Monsterella for a while, and it's going to be some new Calavera the Undead.
But there is a few other things kind of in the works, but I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself. There's another 3 or 4 that I'd like to get out there, but I think I really want to get Calavera and Monsterella out there first. So probably for the next few years, it'll be just lots of Monsterella and Calavera.
I understand. I feel bad asking that sometimes because I'm like, it's like, hey, this thing you just spent all this time and energy on, and that like right now you're about to release it out into the world, but like, what else do you got? And it's like such a dopey interview question thing. It's like, oh, what else is in store for you? It's like, yeah, like let's just get over this hump first. And be happy with what we have here. Like you want the world to witness Monsterella number 2.
Yeah, then there is a ton of other stuff. Like in the next Calavera series that I do, there will be short stories, and it'll be introducing new characters in those short stories that also take place in the same universe as Calavera and Monsterella, and they eventually sort of all come together in the same sort of shared storyline eventually too. But they'll just be short stories in the back of probably Calavera issues.
Like I think one thing I've learned from doing this show for over a year now is that like those comics from the 70s were hugely influential on like everybody. So like this is kind of a no-brainer for not only the people that listen to the show, but the people that have been on the show for the most part in terms of checking this out. So it's really worth it because it's this it's a send up to all of those books that we all kind of know and love from that era, and now that are just not being made in quite the same way anymore. So this is a nice kind of send up to those and homage or whatever we want to call it. But it's like it's that right up your alley if you were into any of those old school comics.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, Nevin, this has been a blast. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. That'll wrap us up, I think, for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson. My guest, Nevin Arnold. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.